You ever noticed how one thought can change your entire emotional state? It starts small, almost reasonable, but what if this goes wrong? What if I'm alone in this? What if it never gets better? And before you know it, you're discouraged, overwhelmed, exhausted, and quietly despairing. The spiral is not new. So let's look into our book and see what we can do about it. This is Every Thought Captive by Kyle Idleman, and we are now on study 3 of session 3. It's called Spiraling Thoughts. Let's read this. Well, I need my glasses. The statistics are alarming. Since 1999, there has been a dramatic increase in deaths by despair, defined as deaths by suicide, drug and alcohol poisoning, and alcoholic liver disease and cirrhosis. As one researcher noted, mortality from deaths of despair far surpass anything seen in America since the dawn of the 20th century. Another report states deaths from these three conditions have risen so much that they have been cited as a major contributor to the recent decline in the overall life expectancy in the United States. It's so sad. This isn't just a troubling trend, but also something that reveals a fundamental truth about our minds. Our thought patterns can either trap us in despair or lead us toward hope. It begins with distorted thinking, viewing a situation in an inaccurate way that puts it in a negative light. This becomes discouragement, dwelling on the negative thoughts without seeking a solution. This leads to disillusionment, a loss in faith that things will ever get better. Finally, it turns to despair, a conclusion that there's no way out. This struggle isn't unique to our anxious age. Even the most powerful and effective servants of God grappled with the pull of despair. In 1 Kings 19, 1-9, we read how Elijah, after his triumph against the prophets of Baal at Mount Carmel, became so overwhelmed by fear that he fled into the wilderness. Once there, he prayed, "I have had enough, Lord. Take my life," in verse 4. What makes Elijah's story particularly relevant is that God's response wasn't to criticize his feelings or dismiss them. Instead, he invited Elijah to bring his anxiety to him. In today's environment of contrast, stress, and negative news, we can either allow our negative thoughts to overwhelm us or learn to go to God with our struggles. Like Elijah, we're not necessarily wrestling with irrational fears. Often our troubles are very real. That's true for sure. The challenge isn't to eliminate all the problems from our lives, but to consciously choose to talk to God about our despair and talk to our despair about God. This simple shift in focus can make all the difference between drowning in our thoughts and finding solid ground in His presence. That is so good. I know, sorry about that. I know for me, I said before, I've gone through major depression and even contemplated suicide. And I don't know if I'm supposed to say those words here on this YouTube, but I think it's very important for people to talk about that someone can seem completely okay and you don't realize that the thoughts in their minds, the things that they're thinking about, can have them spiraling. And that's why it's so important to be there for people, to ask questions. And to talk about God so that they know they have someone they can go to. God is the one we should all be seeking and talking to. But we also need community. We need to talk to each other as well. Let's go on to the questions. We've got more of those 1 to 10 things. In a typical week, how often do you find yourself struggling with the following? Ruminating on past mistakes or future worries, with 1 being rarely, 5 being moderately, and 10 being frequently. Past mistakes or future worries. I used to be really bad about this. I used to constantly replay my mistakes in my head. It's like the only thing I could remember was the mistakes that I made. And I would just go over them and over them in my head and wish that I had done something different, wish that I hadn't made the mistake, and think about what it would be like if I hadn't done that thing. Even simple, stupid mistakes, like not watching out for something in my path and tripping and falling in front of everybody. And it would just eat away at me. And I thought horrible about myself. I thought that I couldn't do anything right. I kept making mistakes because that's all I would remember was the mistakes that I had made. I didn't think about the good things I had done because the mistakes were so glaringly obvious to me, and the good things just didn't seem like anything. And so I spiraled. I became depressed. I just felt so terrible about myself all the time. And it wasn't until I gave my life to Christ and started taking all my problems to God, handing them over to Jesus, that I could let Him take them and I could forget about them. And then He started reminding me of the positive things. And so, over time, I was pulled out of that pit of despair that I had been in. And now, I always take all my cares and worries to Him. So, now, in the present, how often do I ruminate on past mistakes or future worries? I'm going to say 3, because it's not never. And God is still working on me. Okay, how do you find yourself struggling with trying to handle overwhelming feelings by yourself? I do have moments where I feel like I can't talk to anybody around me. I've got to be the positive person. I need to keep those friendships and keep them thinking everything's going great with me and that I'm handling things well, that I'm not drowning. But sometimes I'm overwhelmed and I forget that God's here with me and He can handle my loads. So how often do I struggle with it? I'm going to give myself a 4 on that one. Not quite moderately, but almost. I do need to open up to the people around me more. So starting your day focused on anxious thoughts. How often do you struggle with starting your day focused on anxious thoughts? I think that I don't always start my day focused on anxious thoughts, but if I wake up later than I intended, if my alarm doesn't wake me up right away and I feel rushed, I feel like I'm just barely going to make it on time, that's when it happens that I start getting anxious in the mornings. And at that time, I do need to slow down and take a breath and realize that being a few minutes late is not the end of the world, and I should still take time to talk to God. But I do find myself trying to rush instead, so I'm going to give myself a 4 on that one as well. What about you? How often do you struggle with these things? Is there something in your life that needs to change? Do you need to start focusing more on giving things to God and not trying to control everything yourself? All right, question 2. Read Psalm 55, 1 through 5. Uh, this is Psalm 55 for the director of music with stringed instruments, a maskil of David. It means David wrote this. And you all know that he went through his ups and downs with God, but he always took everything to God. So the beginning of this psalm says, "Listen to my prayer, O God. Do not ignore my plea. Hear me and answer me. My thoughts trouble me, and I am distraught because of what my enemy is saying, because of the threats of the wicked. For they bring down suffering on me and assail me in their anger. My heart is in anguish within me, for terrors of death have fallen on me. Fear and trembling have beset me. Horror has overwhelmed me." Even David was feeling despair, but took it to God. David begins this psalm with a plea for God's help. As he continues to pray, he gets specific about what is stressing him out and causing his despair, his enemies. Think about something that is causing you anxiety right now, and write out a prayer below in which you turn that general anxiety into a specific prayer to God for help. Something that's causing me anxiety right now. It may sound foolish and selfish to the rest of you out there, but honestly, I've been struggling with this YouTube channel. Um, I've been finding myself wanting it to grow, wanting to get more views, and feeling like I'm not doing something right because it's not growing as fast as I think it should, which is silly because it's a whole new channel and I've never done it before, so I shouldn't expect it to grow. But I took it to God. I prayed for God to help me with this, and He said that it's all in His good time and that it's not, I'm not doing it to grow a channel. I'm doing it to be obedient. I'm doing it to spread His word, and He will get it to who needs it. So I shouldn't worry about numbers of views or numbers of subscribers. So, what are you struggling with right now? What kinds of things are you dealing with anxiety about? What has God told you? Have you taken it to God? Have you prayed about it? Let's move on. You got another one of these gray text boxes, like in the last one, that talks about something we need to know according to the author of this. David starts off being honest with God about his despair. Then, and this is huge, he begins to be honest with himself about who God is. He stops talking to God about his despair and starts talking to his despair about God. David reminds himself who God is, what God has done, and what God will do. The way we overcome negative thinking, strongholds, and the world's mold is to capture our thoughts and make them obedient to Christ. That's what David does here. He captures his despairing thoughts and renews his mind by telling himself truths about God. It's what we need to learn to do as well. So, yeah, talk to your anxiety, your struggles. Tell them about God and how great He is and how He can do anything. Read Psalm 55, 6 through 9. That's the next part of the psalm. Let's go on with it. This is a little bit longer section, so bear with me. I said, "Oh, that I had the wings of a dove, I would fly away and be at rest. I would flee far away and stay in the desert." Haven't we all wanted to do that? I would hurry to my place of shelter far from the tempest and storm. Lord, confuse the wicked, confound their words, for I see violence and strife in the city. Day and night they prowl about on its walls. Malice and abuse are within it. Destructive forces are at work in the city. Threats and lies never leave its streets. If an enemy were insulting me, I would endure it. If a foe were rising against me, I could hide. But it is you, a man like myself, my companion, my close friend, with whom I once enjoyed sweet fellowship at the house of God, as we walked about among the worshippers. Let death take my enemies by surprise. Let them go down alive to the realm of the dead, for evil finds lodging among them. As for me, I call to God, and the Lord saves me. Evening, morning, and noon I cry out in distress, and He hears my voice. He rescues me unharmed from the battle waged against me, even though many oppose me. God, who is enthroned from of old, who does not change, He will hear them and humble them, because they have no fear of God. Yes. This is where David is talking about how great God is and how He saves him. That he calls out to God and God takes care of him. And that God will humble his enemies. So David begins this section of his psalm by expressing what he would do in the moment, fly away and be at rest. But then he reminds himself of God's nature. What are a few of the truths that David tells himself about the Lord? Well, he says, "The Lord saves me. He hears my voice. He rescues me unharmed. He's enthroned from of old. He does not change. And he will hear and humble his enemies. And because they have no fear of God. And he does have fear of the Lord. Because he knows God. He's walked with him. He's experienced his love. Number 4, David consistently cried out to God, evening, morning, and noon, in verse 17. Evening, morning, and noon I cry out in distress, and he hears my voice. What practical steps could you take today to establish a similar rhythm of connecting with God. Be specific about when, where, and how you could do this. Well, evening, morning, and noon. Well, the way we talk about days nowadays is be morning, noon, and evening. But yeah, in the evening before you go to bed, last thing you think about at night should be gratitude for what God has gotten you through and prayer for a new day. And in the morning, we should be first thing when we wake up thinking of God and being grateful for that new day and new opportunities, and pray for God to order our day and to be with us and to help everything go smoothly and how He wills it. Then noontime, when we're on our lunch break, we take a moment to thank God for the food that we get to eat and to pray for those that don't have food. Where? Well, I think, it says, sorry. When, where, and how. I only saw the when part, but yeah. So, where? Well, in the mornings it would be right when I wake up in bed. Before I even get up, I should thank God. And at noon, when I'm eating lunch, I should be in my kitchen as I'm preparing. I can talk to God right then and there. And in the evening, as I'm getting ready for bed, just before I get into bed, I should kneel down and pray, humbling myself before the Lord. And how? I think I just went over that. How should I pray? By talking to God, thanking Him, praying for His will and what is needed, and being humble and knowing that He's going to take care of it. All right. There's another text box before question 5. So it says, David begins in a state of distress because he has enemies lining up against him. He's overwhelmed. But he prays honestly and specifically. He asks God to jump into the driver's seat. Morning, noon, and night, he reminds himself who God is and what God has done. David isn't worried anymore. He's worshiping. As he prays, he's reminded of who God is. Isn't that funny how that happens? When we start talking to God and we're just like so overwhelmed and upset. And He changes us in that moment till we start being thankful. He can't help but praise God. As he does, his worship drowns out his worry. I'm not sure that worship and worry can coexist. It doesn't mean the problems go away, that the anxiety goes away, but it loses much of its power over us. The pattern of desperation gives way to the pattern of dependence. We learn to depend on God. Read Psalm 55, 22 through 23, the end of the psalm. So let's see what happens. David has been crying out in despair to God, and he's been talking to Him and led to praising God and talking about how good He is. So let's see what he has to say next. Cast your cares on the Lord, and He will sustain you. He will never let the righteous be shaken. But you, God, will bring down the wicked into the pit of decay. The bloodthirsty and deceitful will not live out half their days. But as for me, I trust in you. The question says, what conclusion did David reach by the end of his psalm? What did he acknowledge about God when it came to his worries? He says, I'm going to cast my cares on God. He's going to sustain me. He's not going to let me be shaken. He's going to take care of my enemies. And I'm just going to trust him. So how about you? What do you need to take to God right now? What worries are overwhelming you that you just need to bring to God and talk to him? Let him lead you to worship. Thank him for the things that he is doing in your life, and know that he's going to continue to work out everything for you, your good. If you feel surrounded by enemies, God's going to take care of them. He's with you right in the middle of all of it. So trust him. Trust that he's going to get you through, and he's going to deal with it. What do you think? If you need prayer for something, if you're in despair, if you're going through a difficult time, number one, pray about it, but also post a prayer request in the comments section. Let the community pray for you. Thank you.